But if there is a simple technique you can use to make your Milky Way shots insanely detailed while using gear you probably already own. Most photographers don't capture the Milky Way in all its glory, but I have developed a simple, repeatable method that pulls way more detail out of your Nightscapes. These photos are called deep track Vertoramas, and in this video I'm going to show you exactly how to use this technique to transform the level of detail in your Milky Way shots. To start, let me first show you what I mean by insanely detailed. Here are two photos from my latest workshop in La Palma. The first one is the standard method most astrophotographers use, and honestly that's the best case result with that approach. The Milky Way is small in frame and soft. There just isn't much detail. Now look at the second one. This is a deep tracked Vertorama. The Milky Way is suddenly larger in frame, sharper, and you can clearly see the dust around the core. The difference is massive. And real quick, I've got a free Milky Way blueprint link below that walks you through the core basics and gear, planning, exposure, and even has a field checklist. If your Milky Way workflow feels a bit random, just click the first link in the description to get it. Anyway, before we go any further, here's the key idea behind deep track Vertoramas. They are simply a way to collect way more light and much cleaner signal than normal Milky Way photos. That's the whole idea. Deep just means more total exposure time, and we'll get into that in a moment. But the whole point is everything we use in this technique, the tracking, the stacking, the panorama, they're just a set of tools we use to gather that extra light while still keeping the wide field of view. Now let's go back to the La Palma images and look at the raw files. That's where the real difference starts. The first photo is an untracked, stacked 40mm shot. Basically the traditional method most astrophotographers use. I took 16 20-second exposures and stacked them. The second photo is a tracked deep panorama shot with a 35mm lens. The panorama has 3 panels, 2 for the sky and 1 for the foreground. Yeah, I shot the foreground during blue hour, that's why it looks like that. Just look at a single raw file from the bottom sky panel and compare it to a raw file from the 14mm shot. The technical difference is huge, and that comes down to 2 simple advantages of deep tracked Vertoramas. First, the 35mm shot is tracked. So instead of a 20-second exposure, I'm using 3-minute exposures. Second, the lens is longer, 35mm instead of 14. So the Milky Way structure is literally larger in frame. Then I combine it with a second sky panel to get the wider field of view back. But tracking and using a longer lens aren't the only reasons this photo has so much detail. Because look at what happens when we actually stack the exposures and stitch the panorama. Suddenly the nebulae and overall structure of the Milky Way are a lot more detailed. And that's because it's a deeper image. The total exposure time is way higher than a normal Nightscape. I shot 8 exposures of 3 minutes for each sky panel. That means the total exposure time of the whole image is 48 minutes. Compared to the 5-ish minutes of the other shot. And that extra depth really helps show the insane detail. Tracking, going deeper and taking a panorama combined result in images like this. So let's first go through the gear you will need to capture one of these insanely detailed Milky Way panoramas, and more importantly, why you need it. First things first, you obviously need your camera and tripod, like any other Milky Way shot. But the first real difference here is the lens. Everyone says to use an ultra wide angle, like 20mm and wider. But we want to go a bit narrower. Start with something between 24 and 35mm and make sure the lens is fast enough, like f1.8 or 2.8. For example. You can also use longer lenses like 50 or 85mm, but get familiar with the technique first and then give this a try. Next, you need a star tracker. This is the foundation of detail shots and the whole reason this technique works. The tracker lets us shoot much longer exposures and gather way more light per profile. I already made a super detailed video about star trackers last week, so I won't repeat myself. Just go and watch that if you don't have a tracker yet, or if you aren't sure how to properly use one. There is a card for that up there. Next, you will need an intervalometer. Most cameras have a maximum shutter speed of 30 seconds, so you'll need an external intervalometer to get past that. Just get a Bluetooth one, it makes your life a lot easier. And finally, optional but very helpful accessory, a two-way panning head. This keeps your camera from rotating in random directions during the pano. You can only move up and down and left and right, which is exactly what we want. If you want more help with general Nightscape gear, like which camera to get or how to assess if a lens is good enough for astro, I get into that in detail inside the free Milky Way blueprint linked below. Okay, so far so good, but how do you actually capture the panel like this? I'll show you how to capture a simple 2-panel one, like the one I shared before. Let's start. First, let's understand the movement of the camera you have to follow. You want to start from the bottom panel and move up. And a pro tip here is to include just a bit of foreground in the bottom panel. This way you can use it as a guide later to merge it with the foreground you will capture. Anyway, you capture all the images of the bottom panel first and then rotate the camera upwards to capture the second one. And I want you to choose a star from around 1/4 from the top of the frame and rotate the camera up to take it to about 1/4 from the bottom. This will ensure enough overlap. And one important thing, while you are shooting the first panel, the camera will slowly rotate because of tracking. Don't straighten it between panels. Just pan upwards from where the camera ended up. It's a very common mistake here to level up the camera again before shooting the second panel. And this can make stitching much harder later. Now you are probably wondering what settings to use for this. Here's the only thing you really need to keep in mind. You want to gather as much clean light as possible in each exposure without clipping the highlights and without making the shots so long that you only get a couple of frames to stack. For shutter speed, with decent tracking and no wind, you can usually get 2 to 3 minutes pretty easily on most setups. If you start to see trailing, just reduce it a bit or fix your tracking. And if tracking still feels a bit shaky to you, just check out the full guide. For aperture, it's always a balance between light and quality. Start wide open, check your corners, and if the stars look messy or the vignetting is too strong, stop down a little. For example, my 24mm is an f1.4 lens, and I shoot at f2 because stars are much cleaner, even though I'm losing a full stop of light. For ISO, just keep it low enough so the histogram doesn't clip on the right. You want clean signal, but not blown out highlights. And now the most important part, depth. You want at least 6 to 8 frames per panel. So if you are shooting 3 minutes and you capture 7 frames, that's already 21 minutes of total exposure on that panel. As a rough baseline, I personally aim for at least 15 to 20 minutes per panel at f2. If you stop down one full stop, just double the total time. That's the easiest way to think about it. Now, more exposure time is always better, but you have to still be realistic. You need to think about the weather, about the moonrise, cutting your session short, and about where the Milky Way core will actually be by the time you finish the last frame. If it dives behind a tree or a hill, the whole shot is ruined. And also, don't just plan your night based on total exposure time. With darks, flats, and checks in between, the entire shots usually take 1.5 to 2 times longer than the total exposure time. And before you move to the second panel, you have to quickly confirm focus because it's easy to accidentally bump it while tilting the camera up. Now let's quickly talk about flat frames because they are critical for clean stitching. Flats remove vignetting so your panorama doesn't end up with ugly gradients in the middle. After darks, switch to aperture priority mode and keep ISO, aperture, and focus the same as the sky shots. Point the camera up and cover the lens with a white t-shirt. Then light it evenly with a tablet or a phone screen. And shoot 20 to 30 flats. The camera will handle the shutter speed automatically. And finally, shoot your foreground with plenty of sky overlap so you can blend it clearly later. So your capture workflow becomes very straightforward. You set up the tracker and the camera, frame the bottom panel, shoot it, and check it. Tilt it up for the second panel with enough overlap, check the focus again, shoot the second panel, then grab your darks, your flats, in the foreground. And at that point, the capturing part is done. Now let's look at a few different ways to stitch the panel. First, you need to stack the two panels separately. I'll use Sequador for simplicity. I will load all the photos here with darks and flats too, and just use the select best pixels as the composition. Move the slider to strict, then hit start, and repeat for the second panel. We want to first stitch the panorama and then do the edits to it. We don't want to edit the two panels separately and then try to stitch them because the two edits might not be the same. There are three ways I will share in this video, from simplest to most advanced. The first way to stitch sounds silly, but it's just using Photoshop. I will open both photos in Lightroom, select both of them with Ctrl A, and then right click and select Edit In. Merge to Panorama in Photoshop, and you can just use the default settings and click OK. This might or might not actually stitch the panorama nicely, but the next method I will share is a bit better and still free. You have to download Microsoft Eyes. It's no longer officially supported, so you'll need to download it from a third-party source. Anyway, stitching the panorama is simple here. Just drag and drop the images and then click the button Next. Change the projection to Mercator or try a few different ones and see which one gives you the best result. You can move the image around to straighten it and make the horizon straight. Then just click Next. There is no need to crop now. Next again, and make sure you save it as a TIFF. Okay, next method is PT GUI Pro. This one is a bit pricey, but many of you might have it already, so let's cover it too. And I have the Pro version, by the way. There is a basic one too. Again, you just drag and drop the photos to load them, then click Align Images. If you want to, move the photo a bit to straighten it. Move it upwards to straighten the horizon and rotate if needed. Then go to the Blending tab, deselect the first two squares and select the blender as multiband. Then go to Create Panorama, again TIFF format, do 16 bits, no compression and no alpha channel. And just stitch it by clicking Create Panorama. If you get a very long file like me, you can go back and drag the bottom and top of the rectangle here to crop the view to only the panorama. This will save you a bit of file size. And here are the three different stitched panels for you to compare. Out of the three methods, I prefer PTGUI, but honestly, Eyes is really good for free software. And you might just want to go with Eyes for now and invest the money that will go to PT in something more useful like PixInsight or some filters. So in this video, you learn the complete process to capture and edit insanely detailed Milky Way shots. But if your composition sucks, all that detail isn't going to save the photo. So watch this video next, where I show you the one framework that instantly leveled up my Nightscape compositions.